Most anti-inflammatory foods lists online are copied from each other and backed by nothing. Yet chronic inflammation is quietly linked to 7 of the 10 leading causes of death in the United States. Researchers have spent decades measuring exactly how specific foods raise or lower inflammatory biomarkers in human blood. A scoring system called the Dietary Inflammatory Index now quantifies 45 dietary components by their measured effect on inflammation. What follows is the evidence-backed anti-inflammatory foods list distilled from peer-reviewed trials, Harvard Health recommendations, and NIH-funded research. Before any food list means anything, you need to understand what researchers are actually measuring. The gold standard biomarker is C-reactive protein, or CRP, produced by the liver in response to inflammatory signals. The American Heart Association classifies CRP below 1 milligram per liter as low cardiovascular risk, 1 to 3 as moderate, and above 3 as high risk. A second key marker is interleukin-6, or IL-6, a pro-inflammatory cytokine that directly triggers CRP production. Tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF-alpha, rounds out the triad. When a clinical trial claims a food is anti-inflammatory, it means that food measurably reduced one or more of these proteins in human subjects over a controlled period. Without biomarker data, a claim is just marketing. Every food on this list earned its place by moving these specific numbers downward in published peer-reviewed research. In 2014, researchers at the University of South Carolina published the Dietary Inflammatory Index, or DII, in the journal Public Health Nutrition. It assigns inflammatory effect scores to 45 food parameters: nutrients, spices, and bioactive compounds, based on nearly 2,000 peer-reviewed studies spanning human trials from 1950 to 2010. A negative DII score means your overall diet is anti-inflammatory. A positive score means pro-inflammatory. Large cohort studies have since validated the index. A 2019 meta-analysis in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, covering over 270,000 participants, found that the most pro-inflammatory diets were consistently associated with measurably worse long-term health outcomes than the most anti-inflammatory ones. The DII is not a fad framework. It is the most rigorously constructed tool we have for connecting dietary patterns to measured inflammation. Fatty fish sits at the top of virtually every evidence-based anti-inflammatory foods list, and the data supports the ranking. Salmon, mackerel, sardines, and anchovies deliver eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid, EPA and DHA, the two omega-3 fatty acids with the strongest anti-inflammatory evidence. A 2017 meta-analysis published in Atherosclerosis, reviewing 68 randomized controlled trials totaling over 4,700 participants, found that omega-3 supplementation reduced CRP by an average of 0.34 milligrams per liter. That is clinically meaningful for someone hovering near the high-risk threshold. EPA and DHA work by competing with arachidonic acid in cell membranes, reducing the production of pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. Harvard Health specifically recommends at least 2 servings of fatty fish per week. The DII scores both EPA and DHA as strongly anti-inflammatory. Dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, collard greens, Swiss chard, are dense sources of folate, vitamin K, and polyphenols, all scored as anti-inflammatory by the DII. But the cruciferous family deserves special attention. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cauliflower contain sulforaphane, an isothiocyanate compound that activates the NRF2 pathway, your body's master regulator of antioxidant defense. A 2018 trial published in Clinical Nutrition found that participants consuming 30 grams of broccoli sprout powder daily for 10 weeks experienced a significant reduction in serum IL-6 compared to placebo. A large nurses' health study analysis covering over 7,000 women found that higher green vegetable intake was associated with lower CRP and TNF-alpha concentrations. These vegetables are also extraordinarily nutrient-dense relative to their caloric load, meaning they deliver anti-inflammatory compounds without metabolic cost. Blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries are among the richest dietary sources of anthocyanins, flavonoid pigments that suppress NF-κB, a master inflammatory signaling pathway. A 2016 meta-analysis in Scientific Reports, analyzing 32 randomized controlled trials, found that berry consumption significantly reduced CRP, IL-6, and TNF-alpha across study populations. Tree nuts, particularly walnuts and almonds, contribute alpha-linolenic acid and vitamin E. The Predeemed trial, the landmark Mediterranean diet study published in the New England Journal of Medicine involving over 7,000 participants, assigned one group 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil daily, making olive oil one of the most studied foods in cardiovascular research. Olive oil's oleocanthal compound inhibits the same COX enzymes targeted by ibuprofen. These 3 food groups, berries, nuts, and olive oil, form the backbone of the most anti-inflammatory dietary patterns studied to date. Turmeric earns its reputation, but with a caveat. Curcumin, its active compound, has shown CRP-lowering effects in a 2015 meta-analysis of 8 randomized controlled trials published in Phytotherapy Research, reducing CRP by a mean of 2.2 milligrams per liter. The catch: curcumin's bioavailability is extremely low without piperine from black pepper, which increases absorption by up to 2,000%. Green tea's epigallocatechin galat, or EGCG, inhibits IL-1 beta signaling. A 2016 meta-analysis in Medicine covering 17 trials found that green tea consumption significantly reduced CRP. Whole grains, oats, brown rice, quinoa, are scored anti-inflammatory on the DII largely through their fiber content. Fiber feeds short-chain fatty acid-producing gut bacteria, which in turn modulates systemic inflammation. The DII scores fiber, flavonoids, and beta-carotene among its most potently anti-inflammatory parameters. An anti-inflammatory foods list is incomplete without naming what the DII scores as pro-inflammatory. Refined carbohydrates, white bread, pastries, sugary cereals, trigger rapid glucose spikes that increase advanced glycation end products, directly activating inflammatory pathways. Trans fats, though largely banned, still appear in some processed foods and are among the most potently pro-inflammatory compounds the DII measures. A 2004 study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that women in the highest trans fat intake quartile had 43% higher CRP levels than those in the lowest. Excess added sugar drives a similar pattern. A 2014 JAMA Internal Medicine study linked very high added sugar diets, those above roughly 20% of daily calories, to the kind of metabolic stress the DII is built to measure. Red and processed meats consistently score pro-inflammatory on the DII. Removing these foods amplifies every anti-inflammatory food you add.